So this is Krista, and I'm the founder and CEO from Doctors to Light, which we provide hope, inspiration, education, and resources to those who are mental illnesses and their family and friends. I am interviewing Lyndsey Fraser, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist and also a certified sex therapist. She has over 7 years of experience working with individuals and couples who have difficulties in the relationship and sexuality desires. So first, let's talk about systematic therapy and what is that?
Sure. So what systemic therapy is we look at the patterns or cycles that clients may get stuck in. Mm-hmm. So for instance, if depression or anxiety is present, we want to get an idea of what might be the cause of that. Mm-hmm. So is it in relation to your relationship, in relation to your family, in relationship to your work, or society as a whole? Okay. So for instance, in my work, I typically work with a lot of couples. What we're going to look at is that it's not so much the two individuals in the couple that are the problem, but it's more about how they're relating to each other. Mm-hmm. So what is that pattern or cycle they get into about how they relate? Okay. What I find is couples are often relieved when I tell them that, because now it's no longer that they are the problem or their partner's the problem, but it's more about how we are not relating and how we can both kind of work out our components or pieces of what the puzzle might be.
Great. So how can relationships affect a person's mental health?
Sure. I think one of the things that comes with relationships is that our emotional and physical and mental worlds are all kind of tied into that. So if we're having a lot of conflict or disconnection with a family member or a partner, we might have symptoms of feeling more depressed or feeling more anxious or kind of having more compulsive or thoughts that are happening as well. I think kind of also within that what often happens is people are often more critical with each other, and they don't have as much empathy. And so when you don't have as much empathy or more critical, oftentimes people feel more inadequate or feel like they're a failure, feel like they're unloved. And so it can have a negative impact in that sense. But on a positive note, when we are feeling secure and safe in our relationships, we can have connection, more joy, more excitement, and all of those things as well. And then also when we're having hardships in life, with that supportive network, it's a lot easier to get through. For when we don't, it's a lot harder to get through.
Right. How would a person know when to go to a therapist for a relationship difficulty or problem?
Sure. Often what I will tell people when it might be time to see a therapist is when you notice that you're having the same conflict kind of over and over again without much resolution. Oftentimes what I will tell couples is I do a lot of the things that I tell clients or couples not to do. And part of that is because I'm emotionally invested. And so when we're emotionally invested in a relationship, it's a lot harder for us to see patterns and cycles that we get stuck in. Kind of what I'll say is we're a little bit closer to what's called an emotional threshold. Okay. And kind of when we cross that emotional threshold, we kind of go more into instinctual or reptilian brain, as I call it. And so we kind of just go out of instinct, which might be flight, fight, or fight, depending on where you're at.
So how can a mental illness affect a relationship?
Sure. I think how mental illness affects a relationship is oftentimes when we're in that place of where depression or anxiety has control, we're a little bit closer to that threshold. And so oftentimes we're kind of going off of more instinctual cycles that aren't working very well, or we might be having anxiety or depression telling us things about ourselves that make us go more internal. And so we often will turn away from our partners versus turning towards our partners. Yeah. And on the other end of that, I think what happens when our partner is in a place, so if you have a partner that has depression or anxiety, what often happens is they're more internal in their world. They often are in a place of shame. They don't feel very good about themselves, and they can't go towards you. So for their partner, it feels lonely. It feels like they're unloved, that they don't appreciate them. And so one of the things that I often will do with my clients and couples is I have the person that has the mental illness to kind of rate how much the mental illness has control right now on that scale of 1 to 10. So if you're at a 10, it means it has complete control, you can't function very well in your daily life, and if you're at a 1, it has no control. And so what I'll find is if both members kind of know where the person's at, I can now know that your reaction to me and what's happening isn't necessarily so much about me, but it might be about having anxiety or depression have control over you. And so it helps clients kind of turn towards each other versus away. So
let's just go kind of into that.
Sure.
So just imagine, well not imagine, but if if your spouse is experiencing some of this and you don't really know what to say, what kind of phrases or like what kind of things should you say to a person?
Sure. I think the biggest component of when your partner is there is just validating their experience. So it's having empathy. I mean, you obviously can never be exactly in what your partner is experiencing, but you might be able to relate to how terrible it must be if I'm anxious and worrying all the time, and how that must feel and how it must be difficult for you. Or if I'm experiencing depression and how being in that state must be really difficult, and I wanting to connect with partners and not being able to connect with partners because you're there. And so what I find is that when a partner feels like you understand kind of where they're at, the easier it is for both people to kind of work through what the mental illness is doing to the relationship.
So like besides that, or in addition to that, how would you recommend to a couple who is experiencing a mental illness?
Sure. I think the biggest thing is to have kind of transparency and vulnerability around what is happening and occurring. A lot of times when I'm working with clients that are suffering from anxiety or depressive symptoms, or even ADD symptoms, sometimes they're embarrassed or they don't want to share with their partner that they're there. But when we don't share with our partner where we're at, kind of what happens is that then the partner starts to think it's about them. And so when we open up that transparency, then we can again kind of turn towards each other versus away from each other, which will actually create kind of more of a stronger bond or connection. Your partner wants to know kind of what your experience is and what's happening for you. They want to know it's not about them too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So let's like go back to a marriage situation and a relationship situation, and let's say how would you work with a couple experiencing difficulties with the marriage?
Sure. I think it's kind of a hard question to answer because it kind of depends on the client or couple or family coming into my office, in the sense that, I've worked with conflict issues or sexuality issues or connection issues. But one thing I think that's in common with all of them is I want to help them change kind of faulty patterns or cycles that they're stuck in. And so it's helping the couple or family or even the individual, because even when an individual's in here, I pretend as if the partner is here with them, is to get an idea of, what that cycle looks like and what those triggers are for that cycle and kind of how do we do it different.
Okay.
But also within that, I think what I like couples to focus on or families to focus on is oftentimes the things that we're fighting about. So for instance, if I'm fighting about my partner didn't put the dishes in the dishwasher, or you didn't come home on time, or you didn't feed the dogs, oftentimes it's not about that external thing that they're fighting about, but it's more about underlying emotional experience. So I try to get couples and families to what that underlying emotional experience is.
Okay.
So is it about not feeling valued, not feeling loved, not feeling appreciated or respected? And so it's kind of a two-piece puzzle that I do. But again, like I said, it depends on, each client has a unique approach.
So let's go into divorce. So how can a divorce affect a person, and do you have any advice for them?
Sure. I think the difficult part with divorce is that there's a multitude of kind of experiences that come with that. From the range of I can feel excited, I can feel relief, I can feel frustrated, I can feel shameful, I can feel regretful. But one of the things I think is the most common for people who are going through divorce is that they're having a combination of those feelings. And they're very confusing because you're having, one where it's like I feel a sense of relief, but I also feel a longing and a desire to still be with my partner. I think it was interesting that I had a client come in on Wednesday night who was talking about kind of a divorce that's happening, and he was talking about how he feels like he's emotionally constipated. That's the word that he used. And he was feeling shameful because he's like, I should be allowing myself to kind of have these emotional experiences that are happening for me. But I don't feel like I can because I have to function and get this business part done. And so one of the things we talked about is that sometimes we do need to contain the emotion when we're going through a divorce, because we do still have to function and get the business part of the divorce done. And it's convoluted and it's messy and it's complicated. And so you're going to kind of have both those experiences at the same time. And it's kind of letting yourself know when's the right time to allow yourself to express it.
Great. So my last question for you is, what can you recommend to as a person who has been abused about intimate relationships?
Sure. One of the things that I've often found with people that have had like an abuse or assault history, is that sometimes they're a little bit more fearful of kind of entering intimate relationships. Kind of depends on what has happened through the assault or the abuse. Sometimes how we feel about ourselves or think about ourselves has changed. Like sometimes we don't feel like we're lovable. Sometimes we feel like we're dirty. Sometimes we're just afraid the person's not going to be there when we need them to be, because oftentimes in these situations it's been really close people in our lives that have hurt us pretty much. So one of the things that I always encourage people that have had those experiences is that relationships in themselves can be healing. So when we do have a positive relationship, you can have the ability to kind of heal some of that damage that has occurred. How I think that can be done is being able to be honest and transparent with your intimate partners about the abuse. Yeah. Not so much about the intimate details of what happened, but about how it affects you today. So
like, does like say that like we like to say that like a person is abused sexually in the past, and they want to find a person to like have that like intimate feeling, and like do you like mind telling them like up in front that I have these issues, or do you wait, or like what would you recommend?
Sure. I mean, I think like any relationship, you want to kind of slowly build it to kind of see if the person can kind of be there with you. So often what I will say is you want to share little vulnerabilities with the person before you disclose it. So sharing intimate details about how you're struggling with something or an emotional experience you're having, and kind of seeing how the person responds. So are they open and validating and accepting? Yeah. Or are they uncomfortable, don't know what to do, or turn away? Okay. And so if you find that the person is able to be open and intimate and vulnerable with you in return, that then might be an opportunity for you to then share kind of some of the experiences that you've had. Okay. And again, like I said, I wouldn't necessarily share like the intimate details. Sometimes it isn't necessary, but it's more about how it's impacting you today. Yeah. So for some clients, what I'll see is that you have somatic responses around abuse or assault. So like maybe my partner touches my side, right? Yeah. And the assault person touched me there as well, and now I'm having a flashback to a memory that's occurred for me. So I might recoil, right? You know, intimate experience with my partner. If my partner wasn't aware that I had that experience, they might think that you don't find them attractive, that you don't love them, that you don't want to be intimate with them. Yeah. And so that's why I think it's always imperative to kind of share how those things impact you. And you might not know until the moment, right? Yeah, yeah. And so in the moment you recoil because you have a flashback that you didn't know you were going to have, then what I'll say is, maybe a little bit after the sexual encounter experience has happened, to go back to them and share that with them. Letting them know that it wasn't about you. I've had an assault history, and this is the part of my body that this memory came back to me, and that's why that happened. Okay. And so letting them know kind of where you're at.
So that's one last question. Yeah. For sure. But so like, does it say that like not like for a person who has a mental illness, and like would you suggest the same thing for the relationship? So like disclose their mental illness, or like what would you recommend? Yeah, I would recommend a similar thing, right? Because you want to know that the person's going to be safe and they can hear it. And when you're in the beginning of a dating relationship, you don't know, right? If this person's going to be safe. And so it's always kind of slowly building that intimacy with them, which is sharing, smaller vulnerabilities that aren't as big of a deal if they don't meet, and then going kind of more in depth is typically kind of what I say. Great. Well, thank you so much for being able to interview for me, and you can subscribe to my channel to view some more interviews with mental health professionals. Thanks. Thank you.